He's here.
Damn it.
Oh, one moment of peace, can you not give us
Where
that?
is he? Where is Gondor's finest? Where is my firstborn?
Fans of both the Lord of the Rings books and movies will often wonder the same thing. What did Denethor have against his youngest son, Faramir? A great deal more affection and trust is shown to Boromir, when Faramir is clearly a very level-headed, capable warrior. So what was the problem? Let's find out.
Build me an army worthy of Mordor.
In the book, Faramir is a deep and thoughtful character. His father doesn't underestimate him in the slightest. In fact, it's quite the opposite. He knows perfectly well that Faramir is capable of being a strong and wise ruler, strong enough not to depend on or be influenced by others, which is basically what Denethor wants. He wants to leave his seat to a son who would be his own master and no wizard's pupil. Now, this is essentially where the tension begins, because Faramir is wise enough to consult someone who is wiser, Gandalf. But there may have been issues even before this. Faramir was born in 2978 of the Third Age, and from his birth onwards, his mother, Finduilas, became very weak, possibly even due to the complications from his birth. We are not really sure. And when Faramir was 5, she died. I think there's a very strong chance that the strained relationship with his father began this early on in his life. Now let's go back to his friendship with Gandalf. The relationship between Faramir and Gandalf started when Faramir was young. The Grey Wizard would often visit Minas Tirith and shared his love for music and lore with the steward's son. The gentle nature that Faramir grew to have, and his love for Gandalf, displeased Denethor, beginning a life of, for lack of a better word, resentment for Faramir. But why would this be such an issue for Denethor? Is it that wrong for a boy to have more than one role model? Or is this just out of pure jealousy that this issue has arisen? No, there were bigger things going on here. Denethor was convinced that Gandalf was attempting to restore the line of kings to Gondor and have Aragorn take his rightful seat upon the throne, which would obviously ultimately usurp Denethor's power, meaning he now essentially seen it as his son being disloyal. What this says to me is that Denethor cares a great deal more about his pride and his position of power than he does about his son. At least the son he believed would not continue his ruling legacy. In the opening chapter of The Return of the King, Gandalf even tells Pippin that Denethor loved Boromir the most. He is not as other men of this time, Pippin, and whatever be his descent from father to son, by some chance the blood of Westerness runs nearly true in him, as it does in his other son Faramir, and yet did not in Boromir, whom he loved best. He had long sight, he can perceive, if it bends his will thither, much of what is passing in the minds of men, even of those that dwell far off. It is difficult to deceive him, and dangerous to try. Then into Faramir's adult life, the disagreements became a lot more about the styles of ruling. Denethor was an extremely proud man, and had become accustomed to power, and he also thought that with any dark threat, the solution would always come from strength of arms, whereas Faramir, a more gentle, thoughtful man, knew that there could be more important things than just base strength. Brute force is not always the answer. In response to this attitude, Denethor would turn all of his attention to his trigger-happy, or in this case sword-happy, and eager for glory son, Boromir, and raised him in accordance with his own beliefs, without any outside interference by old wise wizards. I think Denethor viewed Boromir as his follower, his faithful disciple who would rule in a manner he approved of, whereas in Faramir he saw somewhat of a rival, a strong and wise leader who would do whatever he believes is the right thing. Now, I'm not saying that Denethor favoured Boromir over Faramir because he was able to easier manipulate him into doing exactly what he wanted, how he wanted, but in my opinion, it was almost a way of rebelling out of spite and jealousy. He couldn't bear the fact that his son would look to someone other than himself, the Steward of Gondor, for guidance and wisdom. The disagreements between Faramir and his father grew even worse after Boromir's death, because now the stewardship would naturally pass to Faramir, who had quite different beliefs and was not likely to be influenced to change them by others, even his own father, unless he himself came to think that they should be reconsidered. Denethor could not dictate his will to Faramir, and he resented this. This is why he favoured Boromir as the one who was the more like-minded, and I think he may have been even fearful that after Faramir had ascended to stewardship, that, had Boromir survived, he may even likely be influenced by Faramir, maybe even turn him against their father. It's certainly an interesting topic to discuss. Now, don't get me wrong, of course Denethor loved Faramir. Amidst all the wars and its preoccupations and distractions, the loss of Boromir being the most obvious, his love had sort of taken a back seat, but he remembered how much he loved his son in the end. Interestingly, in earlier drafts, Tolkien intended Denethor to openly exhibit much more love and care for Faramir, but then decided against it, so that the contrast between Denethor's initial coldness and his grief when Faramir was brought to him, stricken down from the battlefield, would be so much greater, which in my opinion was the right choice. It brought a lot more depth through inner conflict to Denethor. Okay, my friends, that is it for today's video. I really hope this answered the question for you and that we covered all of the reasons that Faramir was the lesser loved son. What are your thoughts on this? Was Denethor justified in his favoritism? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Before we go, I would of course like to thank all of our amazing patrons, and an extra special shout out goes to the members of our highest tiers: Kevin, Abram, Matt, Nashith, Denver Steele, Gregory, John and Andrew. We cannot put into words how much we appreciate you guys. That's it from me today, my friends. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more Lord of the Rings and Middle-earth content, and don't forget to check out our other channels. We've recently, in the last few months, launched The Batcave, which is a channel very similar to this, but purely based around Batman and DC characters. If you're interested in that, feel free to check it out and consider subscribing if you enjoy. Okay, thank you all again. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you next time on The Broken Sword.